You said that Eric Armstead will play on the D line. What's the likelihood that he'll play on the offensive line, and what will go into that decision?
He's a D lineman, so there is no likelihood of that. We're not bringing him in here to play both positions. We're bringing him in here to be a defensive lineman. And you know, you watch him run around the basketball court. There's some YouTube clips of him. He's athletic enough, and obviously with that length and size, you know, we've been doing it with some smaller guys. Obviously, if you can do it with some bigger guys, but you don't drop off from an athleticism standpoint, you know, is what we're looking for. So for what we do defensively, he's a defensive lineman for us. So.
Coach, your ability to stop USC and Matt Barkley this year with these recruits, how do you think that they'll be able to help stop them playing in California this year?
I got no idea. We got a lot of respect for Matt. He had a great game against us last year, and we'll see. I don't know how many of these kids, you know, will even be on the trip when we go down to play USC, but that's a long ways away. But hopefully we'll win this year.
Chip, one more question about Eric. When he put this hat on, he said he wanted to play basketball too. I mean, you're aware of that. Was Dana aware of that?
Dana's aware of it. Dana talked to him. So, you know, if we have any kids here that, you know, we have kids that participate in track. If a kid can play both sports, you know, I think Dana has the same rules I have. As long as they're doing well academically, then and they have the ability to do it. I'm sure there's a lot of kids that wish, you know, they could contribute on the basketball court or the baseball field or track. It's a lot easier said than done. You know, it's a pretty tough thing to do, but he'll be given the opportunity. So,
Adam, another Armstead follow-up. But he said one of the tipping points was your honesty with him and just being open that he may not be here his whole career. What is that a typical message for you with most recruits, and why is that important for you?
That's been my message since I got here. I mean, I don't think anybody can say where they're going to be 4 years from now. So, you know, can you tell me that you're going to be at the Register Guard for 4 years? I want to get you on record too. So, we locking you in? I mean, I think it's an honest part of this business is that the average lifespan of a college football coach at each individual school isn't very long. So, you know, what did you know, Mike Stoops, a great friend of mine, I'm sure he told kids he thought he was going to be there long, but, you know, sometimes it's your decision, sometimes it's not your decision. So, you know, we don't worry about things we can't control. We do have control on certain things, but I think with Eric or with any other kid I recruited, I think they appreciate you being honest and upfront with them, you know, and if you start making false promises about playing time or you're going to play this position and then move the kid the next time when he gets on campus, I think you're just setting yourself up for disaster. So we try to be straightforward in everything we do in terms of making sure, again, like I said earlier, do they have all the information they need necessary to make an educated decision? And that's what we kind of hit it off with Eric, because I think that's the way he approached recruiting. He wanted to find out exactly where he stood in every program, and then sat back with him and his family and made a decision to come here. So, and we were excited about that. So,
Steven? Chip, from just a personal standpoint, what's it like for you, you know, after the signing day's over, after you've gotten letters of intent? Is it just a relaxing thing? I mean, what's that like for you?
It's really not. I mean, everybody we got, Steven, we anticipated getting, and, you know, we kind of knew where we stood with everybody. But it's, you know, I think this day itself has just turned into a phenomenon that I just kind of shake my head at. You know, I think it's crazy, to be honest with you. You know, and it's I think it's a great day for the high school kids, and they deserve to have, you know, the press conferences and all those other things. But I think sometimes there's a lot of undue pressure that goes along with that. And, you know, the reality is, you know, we signed, I don't know the number last year, 23, 24 guys. Only 7 of them played for us, and that was a high number for us. So, you know, most of these kids that have their day in the sun today with putting hats on or pulling dogs out or doing whatever they do and decide to do, you know, aren't going to really have an impact next fall. You know, and that's one of the reasons, and we've done this for 3 years since I've been here. We have our first day of winter workouts this morning. So instead of looking at a fax machine, our entire group of kids that are right on campus right now, we were in the indoor facility today. And, you know, our coach's real first day back with them. And because the reality of this thing is our success next year is contingent upon the kids that are in that locker room right now, not the kids who signed letters of intent today. Now, a couple of those kids will fill in, and I think that's great. But the whole phenomenon of what's gone on with signing day and all that other coverage part, I think, is a interesting case study, to be honest with you. So.
Rob?
That said, a couple that everybody was waiting on publicly to announce was Addison and Allen. Did you feel comfortable coming into today when you woke up this morning? They were with you guys?
Yeah, I felt comfortable in their house when I met with them last week, and I felt comfortable when they left here on their visits. But each individual kid, the way it's set up, is allowed to say when they're going to announce and how they're going to do things. But there was nobody today, Rob, where we woke up and was like, "Holy smokes, that kid committed to us." It was, we felt pretty good, when we went to sleep last night. And there wasn't anybody. We weren't tossing and turning. Was this kid going to sign a letter of intent or not sign a letter of intent? So.
Chip, it seems that every year, kind of the whole phenomenon of players flipping or decommitting and going to other schools increases. What's your philosophy in recruiting and dealing with players that have committed somewhere else? And on the flip side, what do you say to your recruits, your commits who maybe get engaged by another school once they've already verbal to you?
Our point with recruits that are committed to us is that we don't force anybody to commit to us, so that's a decision that they make. But we also ask them that if they're committed, that they stay committed, because we're going to let other kids go. We can only take X amount of players at that position, and if we've offered 4 kids for 2 spots, when the first 2 kids decide they're coming, then those 2 other kids are told that they don't have opportunities anymore. So the best analogy I can give you is that if you were going to get married, you're going to get engaged first, and then you don't date other women before you get to the wedding day. So that's what we ask our guys to do, but it's entirely up to them, in terms of how they want to handle it. But I think the type of kid we're recruiting understands what a commitment means, and if they want to start to look at other schools, and we probably were going down the wrong path of that kid to begin with. So.
How about going after other guys?
We don't recruit kids unless they contact us. DeAnthony called us and said he wanted to open up his recruitment. So, and the same with anybody else. So, if a kid's committed to another school, then we wish them the best of luck and we move on. But if they contact us, we'll continue to recruit them. But we're not chasing down kids that are committed to other schools.
Yes, Coach, about your depth at running back, you mentioned that Braylon Addison you may consider as a running back, other positions. Could you comment on DeAnthony Thomas as a between tackle running back? I know a lot of fans, and I know fans don't know what you know, kind of shudder at the idea of him being a in between the tackle type running back. I'd like to see him at slot. So do you have the depth, or are you encouraged with a guy like walk-on like Ayala, how you pronounce his name again? But
Ayala Ford.
Is that reason maybe you didn't get another running back, or just weren't got?
No, we have to get people that we believe fit. So just to take a guy for the sake of taking a guy, but I will caution all those fans that the one time in the Rose Bowl that he ran the ball between the tackles, I think he went 91 yards for a touchdown. So if they don't want to see that, then we won't do that anymore. So I'll make sure
he didn't get touched.
Yeah, because he's really good. What's that?
He never got touched.
I know. That's kind of a unique quality that attracted us to him. He has the ability not to get touched. He wouldn't be down in touch football with the way he plays. So
running backs, there's quite a bit of attrition during the season, and they've got to have a lot of depth there. That's all I'm saying. Is that people,
I'm with you, but we're not going to take a kid just because if we think he has the ability to play here, then obviously we will, we'll extend an offer to him and think he can be a part of it. But I don't think just to take a body for the sake of taking a body, because they're not going to get on the field. So, No, I didn't say that. I said, but Braylon Addison athletically can play a lot of different positions for us, and I think our job as a coaching staff is to make sure that when you get a kid like Braylon, that you don't just pigeonhole him and say, hey, Braylon is just this. And then, how many different ways can you use him is the thing that's really attractive about Braylon, because he can play receiver, he can play running back, he can play quarterback. How it shakes itself out, I don't know, that's a long ways away, but that versatility that he has is really attractive, and that's what I think makes it fun coaching guys like that. It's the same thing with DeAnthony. He can do a lot of different things, but he can beat you as a kick returner, as a punt returner, as a receiver. He doesn't have as good an arm as I would like, but maybe we can work on that during spring ball.
Jesse. Hey, Chip. How has recruiting changed since you've been here as far as the athletes' homes that you and your staff have been able to get into?
That's a good question. I don't think it's changed very much. I think, that's the one thing. I've only been here 5 years, but, Jonathan Stewart was here when I got here, and he was a big high-profile recruit, and Haloti Nada was here before I got here, and he was a big high-profile recruit. I think just the big thing for us is just identifying who the right guys are, in terms of how we do things, and are they a great fit from what we're looking for, and what we're looking for is different than what other schools are looking for. Not that either of us are right, but it's just I think the schools that are successful in this thing are identifying the prospects that we believe can help us. So, I know we've never had a top 5 recruiting class, and by whatever the experts say, but we've had 2 back-to-back top 5 teams. So, it's really where you're ranked at the end of the year, not where you're ranked today. So,
Do you feel like athletes identify Oregon more or better now than when you got here?
good question. No. I think it goes into that phenomenon is that every year I've been here, it's been the greatest class ever, and then the next year it's like, this is the greatest class ever, and then next year this is the greatest class ever. So, when I got here in 2007 and was recruiting as the offensive coordinator, everybody was very receptive to us. It still really comes down to the same base things most of the time. Location is a big deal, and there's a lot of attraction. We have a huge name throughout the country, obviously, with our success, but sometimes when push comes to shove with some kids, distance ends up being a factor. But for maybe a Jake Fisher or, a couple of kids we've got from Texas, or, the kids who came in from Ohio, or some kids from Iowa last year, that wasn't as big a deal to them. But then, we've had it the other way. We've had local kids that we've offered and Oregon State has offered, and they can't wait to get out of the state. So I don't think there's a brush you can paint and just say everything's the same way. You really have to get to know each player as an individual and kind of find out what it is. And then I think our staff does a great job of identifying the qualities that we're looking for. And in moving on, I think sometimes people wait too long or try to hang too long and think that, they're not listening to what the recruit's telling them. And if, someone says they want a big city and nightlife and all that, then that's fine. But, and they take an official visit here, they're not going to find out we're a major metropolitan city. So we're wasting that young man's time. We're also wasting our own time. We need to go out and identify someone that's a good fit for us. So.
Coach, even going back to last year with recruits like Jake Fisher, Andre Irut-Regionia, and James Usher, and now this year with Kyle Long, are you trying to be more physical at the point of attack, or more dive plays possibly?
I don't know if it's dive plays specifically, but, I think everybody's point of emphasis with your offensive lineman is there's a physicality to how this game is played on both sides of the ball. But we won't sacrifice one thing for another. Like, we like this guy because he's a big, tough, physical player, but he can't play the game unless it's played in a phone booth. You know what I mean? Obviously, you're going to have to play in space. So, we really want the best of both worlds. So, if you can get somebody that's got, an upside to him, athleticism, but also there's a toughness to him is really what we're trying to identify. So.
Aaron? Coach, did you guys use national or regional recruiting services this year?
No. We just used video recruiting services.
Was it in part because of what happened last year?
Big part, yeah. Part of, not going there again.
No, I know. Do you see yourself? I'm not talking about anything specific.
No, I'm good. You're fine with the.
Do you see yourself using them again in the future, or are you done with it?
I like kind of what we're doing now. We always analyze it when we're done, and how did it work. But I think about getting tape and getting the information from the individual high schools is kind of how we did it. So.
And then one last thing, Kyle Long talked about maybe trying to get a second year. Is that possible?
I think it has to come once he gets on campus, from what I understand, and they'll petition. But I don't know. I can't give you a percentage of yay or nay or whatever. But I know that both talking to Kyle and his dad Howie and Diane that they're going to try to get that. But I don't. There's a petition process that they go through, and we'll see if that goes through. But I think they have, from what I understood, they have to be enrolled in an NCAA institution before you can petition for anything. So.
George? You have other famous fathers that you use as pipelines? Is that a new recruiting tactic for you guys, philosophy?
I didn't think of it that way, George, but Byron Marshall's dad was actually the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court at one point in time. Dwayne Stanford's dad started the University of Stanford, so the Daniels family have a distillery in Tennessee. No, I don't. I just started looking at that, so we could play this game for a while. But no, it was sometimes you kind of get caught up and it's fun for us, because you get an opportunity in the recruiting process to meet Howie Long. That's pretty cool. When you get a chance to meet Tony Dungy, that's pretty cool. But we ultimately recruited both Eric and Kyle because of Eric and Kyle. So if that's a byproduct of it, you're not going to look and say, at Kyle, geez, I wonder how big he's going to get. And then you look over at Howie, because actually Kyle's actually bigger than Howie now. But we look at that as a positive. I think maybe they have a little bit better understanding of not just the game itself, but maybe kind of everything that goes around the game, because they kind of grew up in that thing. I would argue with people that I think Eric catches the ball as well as he catches the ball because he's been in NFL training camps his whole life playing catch on the side with Peyton Manning and Trent Dilfer and whoever the quarterbacks were that were coaching that were on his dad's team. So,
you said a minute ago, first recruiting class you signed was the best ever, and then the next one was the best ever, and this one is the best ever. Whatever.
Yeah.
How do you actually feel about? I mean, you're not talking about that. You're talking about. I'm assuming you're talking about sort of the hoopla around it.
Yeah, just the hoopla around it, and I don't know, and I'm not, and I hear people on this day, the rankings are stupid, and no one knows. You know who's stupid? Coaches are stupid too. So, we miss as much as the rankings miss, and that's that. I think some people, it's easy, and you'll hear just go through the head coaches signing days today and how many guys rip recruiting rankings, and then at the same time they should rip themselves because we make mistakes too. So it is in the NFL, it's the same thing with the draft. It's an inexact science, and I think how people get caught up in what's ranked as a high class and not a high class is that ultimately the rankings we talk about are the ones that are done at the end of the year after all the bowl games are finally played, and I think that's how we're judged. But and it's nothing against whomever does all the rankings. I mean, it makes for this day and this excitement and this entertainment, and it's fine. But there are certain kids when I'm being like, wow, that kid's ranked at that, and we just thought he was a lot better. But then there's other kids that we thought this kid's a knockdown, slam dunk, no brainer, and then he shows up in the summertime, and you're like, that's the same kid. So we make as many mistakes as everybody else. So.
Coaches never seem to feel bad about a recruiting class.
No, it's a phenomenon.
I mean, is that
it's
true?
That fuels it.
Too?
I agree with you. It fuels the whole thing, George. That's the whole thing. Just like every coach that goes into a kid's house and says, hey, we're the school for you. We are really, really, really average. No one says that. Everything is, we're the best school for you. We're the best situation for you. We're all going to win the national championship. And you're like, Coach, you were 4-8 last year. But that was a bad year. But this next year we're going to be. I mean, everybody's going to put their spin on it, and that's the beauty of today is the coaches feed into this phenomenon as much as the recruiting services and the players themselves and everybody. That's what I guess makes it what it is. So.
One other question, I'll get out of your hair, but what you had to talk with Eric and some of these other guys about, the question of your future came up maybe a little bit more in the last week than
I don't know why.
But I guess my question is, did it come up more than normally it would have, and you had to address that?
No, it came up a couple other times, honestly, and it just earlier, and I just laughed because I talked to one team, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I had no contact with anybody else. So, when other schools were telling kids, coach is going to the Indianapolis Colts, or there's a succession plan for him to go to the Patriots, or all these other things, and I just said that. You got to trust me on this. That's never happened. So do you really want to look at a school that's making up stuff about other places? So, but obviously I knew in talking to Tampa that I had to address it. But I think it's, really exactly how I addressed it was just, I was the kids I met with, Braylon Addison, Chance Allen this week, O'Shea last week, and Eric Armstead, kids that are coming to our place. I addressed it the same way I addressed the job itself. I listened. Just like they listened to other scholarship opportunities that they had, and then I made a decision based upon what was the best situation for me once I had all the information. And then once I had all the information, this is what I decided to do. And I'm not telling you that's what you guys need to do, but I think the process works. I don't know what's right for Eric or O'Shea or Braylon or Chase, but, as long as you're not picking a place because they have really cool uniforms,
What I'm saying is, it come up higher in the conversation than it normally would have.
It was actually
from them.
No, I'm sure it was kind of the elephant in the room, but so we got around to it. But I don't think, except for one, Chance Allen's mom opened up with it. That was her right off the bat, so we answered right off the bat. So it's kind of how they did it. So
So after getting all the information last Sunday, what was the deciding factor or factors for you?
there was a lot, but number one, it was the relationships I have with this coaching staff, first and foremost. So
We're going to get to wind this down. Rick?
Yeah, a couple unrelated questions, if I might. First of all, from the kids' perspective, this has become more of almost a national holiday. Do you see a change in the behavior of the
imagine
kids?
if it was.
Do you see a change in the behavior?
You guys would get time and a half, by the way.
We wish. But do you see a change in the behavior of the kids about how they approach their moment in the sun? And then I was going to, like I say, unrelated, if you had a constructive criticism to make of the recruiting process, how would you change it?
I don't think kids have changed. I think, sometimes just their personalities come out. So, a lot of our kids were just signed them and sent them in. Other kids have press conferences. That's fine. I mean, when you coach a team of 105 players, you're going to have different personalities. You're going to have some kids. You guys realize it in when you interview people. There's some guys that you're immediately going to because they're a tremendous quote and very talkative, and there are other kids that, it's like pulling teeth. So I don't think how it works. I think it just every kid kind of gets an opportunity to kind of be themselves. But how would I change it? I don't know. I just know it seems like it's getting crazier and crazier. And I think I don't have the answer to that. I'm real worried about how workouts are going to be tomorrow more than how this phenomenon is going to continue to take off. So,
Warren?
Coach, kind of a little bit about what George was talking about. How much credence do you give to the star ranking of each individual player, 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, and how much do you concentrate on character of a kid? I think I saw a report that one of Urban Meyer's new recruits was arrested yesterday. So character, I think, is, you've said in the past, is real big for you.
Yeah, it is. We don't get involved in the rankings. We don't recruit a kid because of the rankings. If he happens to be a high-profile kid, then that's okay. If he's not, and there's examples of kids that have come here that weren't high-profile, that were, turned out to be great football players, and everybody can spit them off, just like you can spit off kids that were low draft picks in the NFL or not drafted in the NFL, and they had success. So, there's a lot more that makes up a football player than just a YouTube highlight clip. Really what his makeup is, how willing is he to work, kind of finding out some of those things that you really have to dig deep on and to get the information that you need necessary to make an assessment of what's this kid going to be like. Obviously athletic ability is a component of it. You can have kids that have all the heart in the world, but if you sign an entire class of overachievers, I guarantee your team's going to be really small. Because the overachieving nose guard is 6 foot and the overachieving wideout is 5'7", and next thing you know, you're not going to match up physically with the style of play that you have to play at this level. But it's everything. There's not just one thing you can say, hey, this is the formula, and that's why people miss and that's why people hit. I think it depends on exactly who you get. But there are guys, and again going back to it, there are guys that coaches don't know. The best receiver we ever had at the University of New Hampshire, who broke every single one of Jerry Rice's records, we were smart enough to let him walk on. So, they were smart enough before I got here at Oregon to let T.J. Ward walk on, and he ended up being a second-round draft pick. So, the coaches that say the stars are whack, you can't follow the rankings, are just as guilty themselves. We miss too. So, and that's the unique thing about this is trying to put on this day and grade it and look at it. It's very difficult to kind of grade it and look at it because there are kids, no matter who they are, that everybody could be get this entire room to be in agreement he's a can't-miss kid, and then he just doesn't pan out. And then there are other kids that, you barely even brushed over and didn't talk about that turned into be a great one. So, that's the fun part of sports, those success stories. So.
But a kid's character certainly is important.
Yeah, it's a huge component for what we do. I think we base what we do based on our preparation and how hard we work. So, to try to get a kid in here where we have to explain to them every day about, why we're working or why on the signing date we're having morning workouts as opposed to other places in the country. You got to kind of love this game and have a passion for playing it. So.
Jake.
Coach, you mentioned earlier DeAnthony Thomas was a guy and a couple others that you just had to get on the field as a true freshman. Do you see any guy or guys in this class similarly Lee to DeAnthony last year that you think you'll have to find a way to get them on the field right away next year?
Right now, no, Jake. It's we didn't make that assessment with DeAnthony until we had him in camp, and we got a chance to see him run around, and it was very evident to us, a couple practices in, what this kid's special. But so to say right now, him, and him, you don't know until we'll make that assessment. Some of them come here in the spring. We'll get a couple early enrollees. Jake's here already, and then Eric and I think Evan will be here. And then those other kids will roll in here during the summertime. Sometimes you hear a buzz from our current players that are, throw with them in 7-on-7, like, hey, this kid's pretty good. I remember Darren Thomas saying that. I think DeAnthony's pretty good. So I'll say, I'll see how good an evaluator you are. And he was a pretty good evaluator because he was pretty good. So, but none of those assessment on who'll contribute out of this group we'll be able to make until we get to at least fall camp in August and start to see those guys running around a little bit. So.
Nicole.
What's maybe the most common question or concern you get from these athletes when you go into the living rooms about playing for you?
It varies, It depends on the individual. Some of them came because of the Jacobs Center. Some of them want to know all about that, and the question's just geared towards that. And then other kids want to know about the style of offense you play. Other kids want to know about, my position coach. Other kids want to know about proximity to home. So there's not a. That's the unique thing about it, is that it's different in each, and you have to take them on an individual basis in terms of where they are. But the common theme is, and it was funny because after I did it like the 20th time, I was like, I keep saying that same thing, is that they're all good kids. When I left them, whether it was who I met with, and they're good kids and good families. So it seemed like when I came out of there, that was a common theme, at least for our coaching staff and our assessment of these guys when we walked out of there. But again, we don't see them. I get one visit with them, so to make that huge statement, but I feel by and large we got a group of really good kids coming in. So.
Rob, last one.
Couple nuts and bolts. Bayless, Rodriguez, the only guys for spring then?
In Armstead right now.
In Armstead.
I think there's a couple other kids that have expressed it, but until they're admitted, I can't say anything one way or the other.
The mechanics of the hoops and football thing. Is he a football player until after your bowl game, whenever that is?
Yeah, I haven't really gotten to that with Dana, but I would imagine that's how it would work.
I know you addressed both positions pretty big last year, the offensive line and the linebacker, but only one of those guys at each position this year. I mean, you could have found a guy that fit. Was there a position you would have liked to address with one more body or two?
No. Always, yeah. I mean, I would have taken one at every other position, but it depends on, is there someone that fits everything we're looking for? Just not. It's not fair to a player, and it's not fair to us to take a kid, just say, hey, we need to get another guy. Sure. And then the next year you're recruiting over him, and that kid's never going to play, and you felt it was a stretch. So we have a kind of a, sure. You're either an offer kid or not an offer kid, the way our system is set up. So it's not, we didn't get him, so let's go to the next guy on the board. We feel pretty good. Actually last year, if you look at it, we have certain numbers at each position. We probably went one over in the O-line last year, but we felt like when we were committed and we had a chance to get another kid, that's a really good kid, so we're going to take him because you never know. So would we have liked another linebacker? Yeah. Would we have liked another O-lineman? Yeah. Would you like another Michael James? Yeah. I mean, but everybody we got, they were always offer kids. There was no one we turned around and said, hey, let's take him right now. It's, these kids we've been involved with for a little bit, but we'll still continue to look too. I think if there's an opportunity down the line, it always helps if you have a scholarship or two available, because all of a sudden you didn't know where, someone comes up. If you're at your point and you're like, that kid's really good, but, because we're not going to get rid of somebody and say, this isn't the NFL, we added him, so we have to cut him. So we do have a scholarship or two available if something else were to come up.
And it's come up to start the conditioning workouts. Can you clarify to what extent can you guys have involvement in those? Because you mentioned. Yeah,
we have involvement. It's just agilities. So there's no footballs, there's no plays, there's no shields, blocking schemes. It's change of direction, a lot of heavy breathing, a couple throw ups. It's all conditioning is all it was.
That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.